Ancient technologies. Copper saw. This is a bar of copper. I forgot what it was. Was it 2 to 3 centimeters or something like that thickness, or maybe 2 centimeter thickness, which is thicker than the 0.5 centimeter thickness copper, copper saw that I was using to cut here initially. So you see all the cuts from the previous materials that I cut. Here's where I cut with copper, but a thinner copper pipe or saw, and here's a thicker one. As you can see, I get it close, you can see the damage. There you go. The damage from actually trying to cut. You see, nice and smooth on this side. You see the roughness on this side. That comes from, obviously, sawing. If you look closely, you can see there's an indentation which is bigger than it was before, similar to like the bigness of the indentations, the cuts from other materials. So it did cut more, or at least made it wider. The thing is that the quartz crystal that's in the rock, that's in the red granite, will obviously heat up and become a little bit tougher. Now, quartz typically can be weakened through heat. This can't produce heat through friction, but there's a limit. Eventually, at some point, what ends up happening is the quartz crystals start sawing away at the copper instead of the copper sawing away at the red granite. So I had hopes. The reason I bought this bigger one is like, all right, maybe this size matters, right? Size does matter, and I can cut more. Now, technically, I cut it more, and if I do this for like a good 300 hours, I could probably get a good cut in there. But logically, it's like when you look at the examples I showed before, like we all remember from the last video, you see all of that damage right there. All of that was done with a piece of granite. You see all these other black marks here that's indicating, some cuts I was doing with other materials. When I got to using quartz, if I'm right, yeah, this one was quartz. So when I use a quartz crystal, you see lots more damage versus the metal. So when I use a crystal, it does more damage than when I use metal. All the other ones are metal. But then when I use the granite itself, a red granite, piece of red granite to cut red granite, you see I did a lot more damage, even to the point where I was able to flatten it. Right? So far my experience shows that quartz crystals, or hard gemstones, right, like diamond and stuff like that, right, and even red granite itself, which has quartz crystals in it, obviously, can cut granites. So logically, an ancient person will use different materials and do exactly what I did and try to see which one works better, and whichever one works better is the one they're more likely going to use. So as you can see, I got a bigger bar of copper, but it definitely doesn't do better. I'm going to get me a copper, copper rod, and then use it as a chisel, so that'll be a future video. But I just got my copper bar, or my copper saw, I should say, and I want to try it out. Like I said, you can see, definitely did something. It definitely did something, but you can see how it's kind of like polished. That's because, of course, crystals constantly being frictioned by the friction. I just ended up polishing it more than cutting it. Just wanted to showcase that. So it's leaning more and more to that copper, isn't the way to go. And this is pure copper at that. This is pure copper. This is not even a copper alloy. This is pure copper. I will eventually get me like a copper alloy just to test it out. Because, maybe a better piece of copper, because as you can see, pure copper ain't doing much of anything. But a alloy one should be better. The closest I had to a copper alloy was when I used a penny, which, if I'm right, was this one. This is the penny. You see how, because there was like zinc, it was a zinc copper penny. You see traces of metal flaking. Let me get closer. Little traces of like metal. And that's the zinc. That's the zinc from the penny, right? So it did a little something, but it's not that different from anything else. The one that did the most damage, see, even all the way to the top, I was cutting up here. I was like, oh, give me a second. I was cutting here. I did a lot of damage up here with a quartz crystal, and then I red granite all this. So now we know what materials work better for working on red granite, and this is the type of rock that's used in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Most granite that's used in Egypt, for example, is red granite. All the other stones are like different other stones, but red granite is one of the toughest stones. And as you can see, I am proving that it's tough because of the materials that I use. From the last video, I was like, this was copper. I think this was stainless steel. This was the quartz crystal. This was the zinc copper coated penny. This was a steel or an iron nail that did that groove up there. And all this was just a piece of red granite that I had. That's the end of the video.